Hello and welcome to Traditional Painting the Digital Way. This is where I use digital painting apps to teach traditional painting techniques. This is part 8 of my Apples in a Hat series, and in this video we're going to go ahead and add the final refinements to the apples and the hat. If you're following along traditionally, check out part 1 in this series where I have a list of all the brushes and the paint and the canvas that I use. We're going to be using Corel Painter 2019 for Windows, and we're going to go ahead and just kind of finish on the details of the apple. And here I'm adding sort of the final highlight to the biggest apple in the hat here. And as I said in the previous video, you can go ahead and use cadmium orange mixed with white acrylic gesso if you're following along with your acrylics, and you can also use sort of a little bit of a pinkish mixture for the edge of this apple that I'm working on now. And we just kind of want to show the sunlight shining on the edge of this apple, so you want to go ahead and sort of blend in that highlight. And I'm using a little bit of the darker red inside just to get the final shape on this apple, to add a little bit of depth to it, and just kind of do the final touch-ups and final adjustments. And you can also use a purple color for the edge that's in the shadow right there. And if you're following along with your acrylics, of course you would use dioxazine purple, and you could add a little bit of alizarin crimson to it. And then here I'm adding the final highlight on this apple, the one that has some green and yellow in it. And you can use a light pink color for it, but you want to get it pretty close to white, because these are going to be the final highlights, so you want those to look pretty bright. And I'm also adding a little bit of some light yellowish green, and you can use phthalo yellow green mixed with cadmium yellow if you're following along traditionally with your acrylics. And I'm adding a little bit more dark stripes to one side of the apple just to give it a little bit more of the apple-like texture on it. And you would smudge that in after you add those stripes because you want to keep them soft. And if you're following along traditionally, you can use your number 3 round brush and then smudge it with a finger or a paper towel. Here I'm working on a little bit of the shadows in the hat and also the hat brim. I want to work on the texture a little more. And then I want to work on the apple stems again and just make them a little bit brighter with their highlight there. And I've already highlighted them once, but I want these to look a little bit brighter now because we're getting to the end of the highlights. And you can add pure white if you want to on these. Now make sure that they're broken, the stroke is broken looking, because we don't want a solid line, because as I've said before, the stem has a woody texture, so you kind of want a broken line. But you can almost use pure white on this if you want to, or at least white with just a touch of cadmium orange in it, just to make these stand out for the final highlights on the stem. And I'm just kind of working on the shape of the stem, and of course at the bottom of the stem where they go into the apple, there's a little concave part, so you want that to look darker, and you can use a dark purple for that. You can use dioxazine purple, or you can add some ultramarine blue to it. And you can even add some burnt umber if you want to. You just kind of want to keep it a dark color there, though, so that you can show that it's the concave part of the apple where the stem is. And then I'm working on the outside apple there and just trying to add the highlight to the stem there. And I just made it a little bit different angle than the photo reference because it kind of gets lost in the picture into the hat band. So I just made it a little bit different angle, and so that it would show up better. and just kind of working again on the edge of this apple here, trying to get it, the shape of it, the final shape of it. This is going to be sort of the final shape of it, and so I'm just working on it with a little bit of the shadow color and trying to make the stem for the middle apple show up just a little bit better. And so I kind of moved it over so that it wouldn't touch the edge of the apple and get lost. When you're painting, you want to avoid things like that, where things are just right next to each other instead of overlapping, because it just kind of doesn't show depth very well. So you want to go ahead and add things over the top of them, overlapping, or just kind of move them away from each other, because otherwise it kind of makes your painting look unclear in parts. So you want to try and show overlapping parts, or just move them further away from each other, and that's what I did with that stem. And then I'm just kind of working on the pattern of the inside of the hat again, trying to get a little bit of that straw pattern. These are all the final touches that you do to your painting, the final refinements that you do, and I would recommend that you step back from your painting and you look at it and study and see exactly kind of what you need to do, and just kind of, you know, this is what I did with Corel Painter. You can't step back from, but you can zoom out, and the zooming out is sort of like a step back, and so that's what you want to do. Just kind of zoom out and look at it and see what it looks like from a distance. And of course, traditionally, you just step back from your canvas and walk away from it and look at it from a distance. And so I thought I should work on the shape of this apple just a little bit more. So I added some more red color to it. And as I've mentioned before, it doesn't matter in these apples if you have different shades of red. In fact, it's better, because that gives it more of a three-dimensional and a rounded look. So I added some darker red and a little bit of some medium red, which if you're following along traditionally, you can use your cadmium red light for this, or maybe Grumbacher red. And then here I'm just kind of looking to see what it looks like. What is it looking like from a distance there? And I've got the apples in the hat going pretty well, so I'm going to go ahead and work on the ones that are in the grass. And since they're in the grass, we don't need to draw the whole apple. We can just draw the parts that are going to be outside of the grass there. And so I'm just kind of adding some of the detail to them, but they don't have to be quite as detailed as the ones that are in the hat. Now, I did want to work on the shape of the middle apple there, just because it's not a completely round shape. It looks like it may be kind of upside down, so the bottom of the apple has got lumps on it and curved shapes, so I wanted to kind of show that. So what I'm doing is just using my acrylic real long bristle brush there and adding different colors of red there. I've even got an orangish looking red, and you just want to kind of smudge all those together and sort of get the shape of the bottom of an apple here. And so that's what I'm trying to do, but the sun is still hitting it right here, so you would add some highlight there on the edges, and probably you would take some white acrylic gesso and just add a little bit of some Grumbacher red, and then just kind of smudge it in for the final highlight. And I'm using the just add water, or the grainy water brush here, and it makes a really good blending brush. And then of course I can use my regular diffuse blur. And then I wanted to add a little bit of that spotted texture that apples have. So I'm using the variable spray or the pepper spray from the airbrush category and just spraying on some dark red or some very light red, and that just gives it the texture of the apples. And then I'm working on this apple next to the hat here, and you want to go ahead and bring it up over the brim so that it shows the depth that you have in your painting here. And it's going to have a lot of highlight on it, so you can go ahead and add really light pink, and then go ahead and add an almost pure white if you want to right there, because the sun is really hitting that apple and it's really bright. So you want to go ahead and leave a little bit of a spot which is almost pure white. And make sure that you smudge it in though, so that you get the smooth texture of the apple there. And here I'm just working on adding a little bit more highlights. Now you want to give the overlapping look here instead of them just touching on the edges. So you want to make sure that that upside down apple is in front of the apple that's next to the hat. And then I'm using the spray brush again to add some more texture to the hat, or not to the hat, to the apples, and also to the apples in the hat. And so I want to go ahead and use reds and a little bit of some really light color just for some final texture on those apples. And then I want to finish the last apple, and again I'm adding different colors of red here, and also adding the real bright highlights because the sun is also hitting this apple really brightly. And so you want to go ahead and smooth those together. And then this one's not going to have a lot of detail because it's mostly hidden in the grass, but you can show the highlighted edge of it. And then I'm adding a little bit of the variable spray. And how you would do the variable splatter in a traditional way is to take your paintbrush, to take an old toothbrush actually, and dip it in a very thinned down version of paint, and then splatter it on your apples, and make sure that you cover some of your other parts so that you don't get the spray on them, but just splatter a little bit of that with an old toothbrush on your apples, and that will give you the texture if you're following along with your acrylics. So this is the end of part 8 of Apples in a Hat, and part 9 will be the final part, and that will be where we add the flowers and the final grass strands that are pulled up inside and over the hat. So thanks everybody for watching, and if you want to catch the final part, then hit that subscribe button. And thanks for all your support. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments down below, and I will catch you later.